Stewart Fulton, welcome to the Tokyo Living Podcast.
How you doing, Sam? Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you on. So on the show from time to time, I like to get people on who share my love and passion for martial arts and combat sports, particularly foreigners that have practiced and doing things in that space over here. And you've got a very interesting perspective on this, having been a former competitor and now a commentator. Perhaps if you can just start by giving the listeners a bit of a background, especially in terms of how you got into fighting, into martial arts, and also how you made your way over to Japan.
All right, rewind back to my childhood. My father was a sportsman, so I grew up with loads of different sports, outdoor sports, indoor sports. I ran track and field, went into basketball, raced mountain bikes, did more touring with mountain biking than racing, to be honest. But coming to the end of high school, basketball wasn't really a thing that I wanted to pursue or was able really to pursue. So I kind of reached this point. I had an operation on my knee, rehabilitated that, and I thought I've got to do something. I have to do something, because it was not out of a sense of obligation, but just a burning. You know what it's like when you like sports, you got to do it. You got to find something.
Yeah.
So I just happened to speaking to a friend of mine through the music scene, actually, who was into Wing Chun and stuff like that, and he mentioned what was then called the Edinburgh Cali and Kickboxing Club, I think it was. And then it changed to the Rick Young's Black Belt Academy. So he mentioned how great it was. Went along, watched the lesson, saw Rick in action, and he did TKD lessons. Jeet Kune Do lessons.
Okay.
Yeah, and Muay Thai and Newaza as well, with the gi. At that time, it was only with the gi, pretty much. He did a little bit of catch wrestling under Eric Paulson,
okay,
but it was mostly with the gi. Anyway, I watched a lesson. I thought this looks great. Went along, started smacking the Thai pads, and learned a little bit of JKD, and got hooked. Yeah, took it from there, really. So,
yeah. And how old were you at that time?
Well, yeah, I must have been 21.
Okay.
So fairly late, not really. I did a little bit of judo when I was a kid, but other than that, I didn't really grow up with the martial arts as such.
Yeah. And just for the listeners, you're a fairly large individual. How tall are you? And what sort of frame were you in? You said you played basketball. Had you sort of filled out at that stage, or what sort of when I was
playing basketball, so I grew pretty quickly, and I was able to dunk by the time I was 16, 17.
Wow.
But I was a hell of a lot lighter than I am now.
Right.
6'5", which is 1.94, 1.95 meters. I was basically sometimes playing center, sometimes playing on the outside. So I really enjoyed that. But I was, in basketball, there's always a bigger fish, right?
Yeah, for sure.
There's some big guys that know how to throw their weight around,
Yeah.
So, me trying to hustle and baseline was quite difficult, but I loved it.
Yeah. And so, how quickly did you sort of move into the competitive arena with your martial arts, and where did you take it from there?
Right. Yeah. Well, very quickly I realized that what we were doing at the academy at that time was, basically mixed martial arts. We weren't putting them all together as a whole as such, but we were training the components and seeing how they could intermingle. So when I realized that there was a lot of practical application in what we were doing, I thought, it'd be really nice to actually find out if this works, So it was always in the back of my mind when I was in Edinburgh, and it was only really when I came to Japan I got the opportunity to try it competitively, because it was still, almost unheard of and incredibly minor in the UK,
Yeah.
Back in 99, 2000.
Right. Yeah. And so when did you come to Japan, and what was the spark for that?
January 2001. So I I came to teach English. I was going to teach in Spain. I wanted to go to Spain, but my career advisor at university, he mentioned opportunities in Japan, and it just clicked. I was like, I'd been watching videos of Sakuraba on, VHS in Pride, and I thought, this is it. That's where I have to go.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and so where did you end up when you came to Japan? Were you in Tokyo? Were you where did you come originally?
Basically, between Saitama and Tokyo.
Mm.
Sort of flitting around, moving between the two.
Yeah, and where did you start training?
So I first started training at Purebred, one of the Shuto satellite gyms at the Saitama Super Arena Gold's gym there.
Yes. Yeah.
So occasionally Ensen Inoue would be in there. And,
okay.
Before the Shuto class, Miyu Yamamoto was taking the kids wrestling class, and Urson was still a nipper, he was still running around there. So it was funny the way things worked out, years and years later, I ended up becoming friends with Miyu and working together, and it's things just came full circle,
Yeah.
So that was where I first started. It was under the Shuto banner, but that was really just a few months before I moved to Takada Dojo as a live-in student.
Wow. So describe that experience then, the Uchideshi experience.
Hellish.
What was a typical day? What was a typical training day? And
you get up, you go to the chanko room, you start chopping the vegetables and getting them in the chanko pot. You get the large bowl, the large rice cooker ready. You don't fully get the chanko ready. You just get the daikon and the harder vegetables, kind of softened up. The softer ones go in at lunchtime when everybody comes back,
Yeah.
So it's a bit fresher. So that's in the morning. Then you've got to make sure all the senpai's clothes are dried and folded the way they like them folded, and put in their lockers. Tidy things up. Get over to the dojo, and then before the pros arrive, about 11 a.m. we arrive there, and the pros come in about 12 or 1. We start the morning workout, which is the old school. It was at that time. It was the old school pro wrestling style, shindeshi workout. The 500 squats, squat jumps, 1,000,000 push-ups, and all the rest of that.
Yeah.
Then the pros come. The timer gets started. 5 minutes, looping with 30-second intervals, and it's just sparring right through to lunchtime. Yeah.
Wow.
And, the summer of 2001 was the hottest on record for about 80 years, I believe. So it actually reminds me of this summer a little bit. Yeah. My first summer here, and I'm in the dojo sweating. I mean, I'm doing 500 squats, and halfway through, you're just standing in a pool, literally a puddle of your own sweat.
Yeah.
So pretty much that. Back to the chanko room before the pros come back. Get the chanko ready, take all the washing, start that, because there's about several, at least 5 or 6 loads of washing to do. Then they come back, get the dinner out, the lunch out, and the okazu, the side dishes as well. Chanko's not enough on its own.
Yeah.
So that's all got to be right. They eat, leave, you eat, tidy up, wash the clothes, try to get everything done, plus the shopping, the food shopping. We had a it was called Chanko Sen, basically a little purse with the money that gets used for the food. And basically we could spend as much as we wanted on food. It was a free-for-all. You just eat as much as you want, get as big as you can.
Yeah.
Was the motto. So from there, that takes you through to about 5, 6, and then that's when the classes start. So you need to get back to the dojo for the paying customers coming in, taking the kickboxing classes, the boxing classes, the wrestling classes, the grappling classes, and you need to try and get a weight training session in as well.
Yeah. Wow.
So that takes you right through till closing. 10, 11 o'clock. Clean up. take all the stuff back to the Chanko room again, washing, cleaning, eating again. Pros don't eat at night; they eat at home. They eat elsewhere at night.
Right.
So it was pretty much just the shindeshi, the uchideshi or live-in students we were there at night together. So that took you through to bedtime really, and then up the next day, same again.
Amazing. Yeah. And how long did you do this for?
I did that from the summer through to the spring of 2002, and then left and formed a team with Genki Sudo, and had my professional debut 2003, March 2003, a year after that.
Okay. And so were you still training full-time after you left the Ushideshi program? Were you working as well? Or?
I was for a short time, yeah. I was training full-time with the help of a sponsor. And but after a while, you know, I needed some money.
Yeah.
There's only so much you know, being hungry can take you. Exactly. So I started working part-time, teaching part-time and training. So that was quite hard. You know, a lot of the guys, especially the Shuto guys that I was talking to, they were, you know, some of them were doctors and stuff, working full time, training as much as they can, and fighting as often as they can. You know, it's not an easy schedule, as you can imagine.
Yeah. And when you made that pro debut, what organization was that with? And
so that was under GCM. Was it GCM? So Wajid's Keishukai network ran a bunch of events, and the first one I debuted in was called Demolition, and there was only a few of those demolitions, I think, and then they changed to DOG, which was a cage thing, and then it changed to Cage Force. So, but it was all under the Wajid's Keishukai banner. And for anybody that doesn't know, that whole era of the Wajid's Keishukai was just phenomenal, and it spawned a plethora of incredible fighters. Some who went on to the UFC, into Pride, and just changed the face of mixed martial arts here and made an impact on the world forever. Yeah.
Amazing. And so you stuck with that federation throughout your competitive career, or did you compete in other organizations?
Yeah, I did a couple of others, a couple of other dodgier small ones. They're not regulated here, as you might know. So rules can be quite fanciful. Yeah.
Is it Grachan?
Grachan, yeah, that's been known for its. Well, yeah, it's Grachan's at the level where some of the records don't appear on the pro fighters' actual records because they're not seen as being professional wins or losses.
Right.
But, I fought in one called Kingdom Argives, and I emailed the organizer before the event because I realized I didn't know what the rules were. I said, "What's the rules?" He said, "What rules do you want?"
Right.
I said, "Anything close to the unified rules, please, UFC, with elbows. I wanted elbows, right?"
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay. So we show up on the day and we sat down for the rule meeting, and he says, "Right, it's basically Vale Tudo, old school, no holds barred. Headbutts are allowed. 12 to 6 elbows are allowed." And I'm side-eyeing the guys, who are there. I don't know any of them, right? And they've all got their poker faces on. But I was like, seriously?
Wow.
So that was quite interesting. So I fought in a couple of different things. Yeah.
And how long did you fight for? When did you have your last fight?
2003 through to 2010.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was never, funnily enough, I was never really interested in chasing a championship or a belt. It always, like I said earlier, it always went back to the roots of, does this work? Can I make these things work? Can I try and test them? and just enjoy the learning process of it, you know.
Yeah.
I did think that I would like to fight on one of the New Year's Eve cards here. You know, I thought that would be a nice goal to have. But I'm unlike a lot of fighters who are like, "Oh, I want to be champion of the world, UFC champion." I didn't care about that at all. That wasn't my motivation whatsoever.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. From a karate background, there's always almost like a dichotomy of self-defense, sort of street fight orientated karate, and then competition karate. Because, I mean, especially in Kyokushin, the rules are very, very different and quite limited. You know, it's full contact, has this reputation as being, you know, a very strong style. But the rules, obviously, without face punches and without grappling, it's very restrictive. Obviously, mixed martial arts is a lot closer to a no holds barred and no rules style of fighting, but it is still a competition. How much do you sort of see that? I mean, are there people like you that were more focused on learning mixed martial arts as opposed to being a competitor and being an athlete and wanting to win? And yeah, I mean, what's sort of been your experience in that sort of space?
Yeah, well, of course, I've primarily trained with competitors, joining the pro sparring sessions. But I've trained with a lot of people who, you know, were not interested. They just love to grapple, or they love to kickbox, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've seen both sides of it, and there's not really much separates them, to be honest. Really, the only thing that separates anyone in it is those who go on to become champions. You know, they have something special.
And we'll talk a little bit later about the whole scene sort of then and now. But in that era was obviously a very, very strong era in combat sports. Were there any people, or is there one person that you would have loved to have squared off against at that time?
Well, Emelianenko Fedor was the same age as me.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
So, you know, I'm pretty confident he would have smashed me, but
smashed everyone. Right?
Yeah. But, you know, that really would have been a fantastic challenge, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Just legend. See how much you could, you know, do against someone of that caliber. I did get offered 2 fights against Shrek Sekine, who is one of the few heavyweights in Japan, and he's still active. He was in the police force, and he actually left to pursue his career. He fought a couple of times in one championship, and then I think he's in Ryzen just now.
Yeah.
And I was injured both times they offered me, so I never got the chance. And at the time, I kind of wanted to. That opportunity, I thought it'd be great to punch a policeman in the face, you know, legally. But yeah, that never transpired. And I since, you know, met him and great guy, a lot of respect for him, and he's still pushing on. And I even commentated on one of his matches in Quintet.
Okay, right. Yeah. One other sort of training related question. This is a very random question. You know, you were with us for a certain time at Club 360, and one day we happened to be doing some work with a grip dynamometer. Now, we use a grip dynamometer to measure grip strength, mainly for assessment of musculoskeletal conditions, you know, hand, wrist, elbow conditions. And that thing, you know, if you have a tennis elbow, for example, you'll squeeze it and you'll get some pain at like 5 or 10 kilos of force. The average person we test on that thing is about sort of 30 kilos. You know, stronger males, maybe sort of 40. I know, you know, if I'm in good shape and relatively fresh, I can maybe push into the mid 50s. The memory stands out very clearly of you just grabbing that thing and squeezing it until the dial goes all the way around. Maxed it out, and it maxes out at 90 kilos. And I'd never seen that before. And that was pretty special. Your grip strength, was that something you worked on specifically, or is it something that you developed through just your normal sort of grappling, or is it something that was just naturally a gift?
For a long, long time, I didn't focus on it at all, but I did. A couple of people had mentioned I had a natural strength there, but I thought, I'm just bigger than them. They're just saying that because I'm a bit bigger and stronger. I never really thought about it. But from, I don't know, maybe from about 2011 onwards, I started deadlifting more, and I would only really use straps, at like 1 or 2 rep maximum, so it could have come through that, plus the grappling, a lot of pull-ups.
Yeah, but
I wasn't using the gi then. I wasn't using I wasn't training with the gi then, so it obviously didn't come from that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can only really attribute it to be a bit of natural, plus all the grappling, and deadlifting and stuff like that.
I want to move on now to sort of the next stage, your commentary career. I know any sports fan, I'm sure, has sort of many times in their life just sort of sat back on the couch and looked at announcers and commentators and think, these people get paid to talk about sport. It just seems like the dream job, and you're living that dream. How did that come about?
Well, Pancras was the first thing. They signed a deal with UFC Fight Pass in 2015, early 2015, mid 2015, and then so they did. I think they did a pilot around about September, October of that year. I was in Scotland for a month, and I'd heard about it. So I arranged a meeting when I came back, and I managed to get a sit down with the boss at the time, Mr. Sakai, and I explained my background and stuff. And I hadn't done commentary, but there's very, very few people in Japan who had or still do commentary even now. Yeah. So that wasn't an issue, but my background spoke for itself. I knew the game. I knew most of the fighters, and knew exactly what I was looking at.
And you've got a cool voice and an accent.
Well, I didn't realize that myself till later, till I was told. But I think having some TV experience helped as well. I wasn't uncomfortable in front of a camera or with a mic, even though I'm not particularly. I wouldn't say I'm a showman at all. But yeah, I did feel quite comfortable taking that on. So yeah, he offered me the job on the spot, and that was it. So November 2015, I think I did my first show, Pancras 271. Okay.
Wow. And then and how was that first show? How was the experience?
Nervous, very nervous. Yeah. The night before, looking through my notes and thinking of all the things I'm going to say, because the guy I was with, he'd already done 1 or 2, I think, for them. And so he was like, basically, he said, "I'm color, you're going to be play-by-play." And I'm like, okay, what's play-by-play? So I had to find out what the hell that was, But as it turns out, it suited me, and I was really keen on doing a good job,
For sure, yeah. And then how did it sort of progress from there?
Yeah, so that was 1 show a month. Basically, Pancras were doing 10 shows a year for right through that time, and then made a name for myself, got known, and then I was asked to do some other things, shoot boxing, Ganryu Jima, that moat fighting one that folded, unfortunately, and then into quintet and pro wrestling from a couple of years back.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, how I guess how does the actual process work? So you've got an event. How do you approach that? How much research do you do on the fighters? And how does the actual fight day work? Do you sort of speak to any of the fighters before the event? And you give us a bit of a rundown on what's actually involved.
Well, I take it very seriously. So I put hours of preparation into it. I'll map out the card. I'll look at the card, the skeleton of the card, who's opening, the card, what weight classes right through to the co-main and the main event, the rankings, so the implications of, you know, a number 3 ranker beating a number 2. Then I'll look at their records, take a note of their records, and I'll cross-reference them with other fighters who are, you know, signed to the organization or on the card, looking for patterns in, you know, who's faced each other and how it went. Then I'll look at their fights, if I'm not that familiar with them, or even if I am familiar with them, but just need to have a wee look at their style and skill sets. Again, I'll try to look at some older fights, some newer fights, to see what progressions and evolution they've made with their MMA, if it's MMA or it could be kickboxing. So that helps my notes with some, you know, smaller insights into the nuances of what they're doing, the way they move, the techniques they favor, where they train, who they trained under, all of that stuff. It's all, to me, it's all just patterns, numbers, dates, names, and techniques. I just look at all those patterns and try to fit it all together into the jigsaw puzzle. So that's before.
And I must say, I mean, I was joking before about the commentary job looking like a dream job, and you just sit there and talk about sport. But when you hear a good commentator commentate, and a very someone who's very knowledgeable about the sport, it is very impressive, and it does give a lot to the experience of watching the sport. Oh,
it does, yeah. And I try to watch and take notes from commentators I respect, not necessarily just in the fight game, but good commentators in any sports. The way a commentator can weave explaining the action well with elements of stats and facts about the fighters, it's fascinating, and over the years I've tried to get much better at that. So I always thought, commentate, you could sit on the sofa and watch a fight and commentate with your buddies, surely anybody could do that, but when you actually sit there and it's, you're on air in 5, 4 and then it's all happening, you have to be on the ball. There's no taking a rest, you have to be on the ball. You have to be in the moment. You have to live and breathe it. You just, everything disappears. It's like tunnel vision almost,
Sure. Yeah. And so how does that sort of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 work? I mean, obviously there's sound checks and all that sort of stuff. Are you communicating with the sort of producers of the show, or the event? How does that all sort of come together?
Yeah, so depending on the show, for example, Pancras will have an assistant director with us, and he's, obviously in his ear, he's got the director. So, he's giving us some cues on a whiteboard every now and then, depending on, if there's commercial breaks or if there's a guest appearance from somebody famous, or the points, the open scoring between rounds, just general stuff like that. We do get a bit of help depending on the organization. A lot of the organizations here, they just let the English commentary do their own thing. So it's not particularly monitored, but like I said, I take it super seriously, and I'm not there to chat about what I had for breakfast, and I always try to be very objective about what I'm looking at. I can't stand commentators, like I said, who talk about what they had for lunch, or they favor a fighter, and it comes across.
You can tell, even if it's not explicit, you can.
It's painful to hear that. I think it's a job that should be taken very seriously. So I try to, but obviously I'm trying to have fun with it as well.
I guess, what are some of the differences between both organizations and also between different sports, whether it be MMA, kickboxing, and especially you mentioned in the last few years you've been doing pro wrestling as well. How do they sort of differ? I mean, the commentary, the way that sort of system differs, but also just the organization, the event, the field, the sort of atmosphere. How would you sort of describe the differences between?
Well, MMA and kickboxing here are very similar in many ways, and there is a little bit of a crossover in audience, but I say a little bit. It's actually, for the most part, is vastly different. The crowd that go to kickboxing shows are quite different from crowds that go to MMA shows, and different again with pro wrestling. And in pro wrestling, the type of pro wrestling, whether it be heavily gimmicky or strong style or women's Josh pro wrestling, they're all slightly unique and peculiar in their own ways. But I don't feel a huge difference between kickboxing and MMA. Especially in the way I call the action, because obviously kickboxing is a huge part of MMA. One of the biggest challenges for me was quintet, professional grappling.
Yeah,
because you have so many different moves.
So technical.
So technical, and the transitions can happen very quickly, and they can happen successfully, because these guys are so high level. They're not reacting to what's happening at the moment. They're thinking 2 or 3 moves ahead. So trying to explain that, and each move can have different names depending on whether it be a Japanese word or a Brazilian, or through catch wrestling, or even 10th Planet in the States. They have their own language for a lot of these moves, So it's really deep, and it was difficult at first, really quite difficult. But I'm glad I took that on, because I learned a lot.
Yeah. And how do you feel as a previous athlete, a former athlete, being in that environment in a different sort of capacity? I mean, any athlete who's taken their training fairly seriously, and maybe this is different. I sort of had a similar conversation with Nick Pettis, because for him, also, even though he was extremely successful in competition, that was never really his original goal. He wanted to be a karateka, but he didn't set out to become a world champion. I know for me, I always had a very, very strong competitive drive. That's essentially why I dedicated a lot of my life to the art and to the sport. And so when I first retired from competition, it was very difficult to be in that environment and not be able to compete, and still thinking you could get in there, but sort of knowing you can't. And how does it feel for you? Are you so focused on optimizing your performance as a commentator that you don't really sort of see yourself in that light anymore, or do you still have that little spark that thinks, I could still do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess because I didn't slide straight into commentary from retiring from MMA, that the gap helped. But certainly for the 2 years, at least 2 years after retiring, I had pangs to get back in there, especially because I was still in really good shape. And I started focusing a lot on strength and conditioning, which I knew nothing about in the early 2000s. The training was terrible here. There was just no trainers to help us with any kind of prehab, rehab, or good strength and conditioning. So I got bigger and stronger, noticeably stronger after I retired. And I thought, I need to use this. I need to unleash this. But as the years went on, so finished 2010, and then so 2015 I started commentary. So I didn't really feel, I always have this, even now sometimes I have this feeling of feeling much safer at the commentary desk than being in there. It's just generally a little bit safer for the body. The brain.
Absolutely.
But it is nice to have that insight. yeah, you can't really put a price on that as a commentator, having that insight. I mean, there's plenty of great commentators who've never competed in their lives. You know, they just understand it so very intimately. But I have that little bit deeper insight in it, and it definitely helps. It means I think I can enjoy the moment in a different way, because I know what the guys are feeling. I know what they might be thinking at that moment in time.
For sure. Yeah, I think it definitely adds to it. And yeah, it can sort of work the other way as well. I know, there are some current competitors that commentate as well. I know Dominic Cruz in the UFC, he feels that his work as a commentator actually helps his training and competition, because he's studying and researching, and he thinks he feels like that adds another layer to his abilities as an athlete as well. So it's interesting how it can sort of work in both ways. Yeah. Are there any sort of really unique experiences that you've got? Obviously, you've been around some massive stars through your time in both competition, and you mentioned Genki Tsudo, and obviously through Quintet, you've I assume spent some time with Sakuraba, and what are some of the big experiences that you've had since you've been out here and involved in this industry?
Oh, there's so many, but mentioning Sakuraba takes me back to we had a Bonenkai at the end of 2001, an end of year party. So it was just it was some of the dojo members and all the fighters and the deshi, the students. The second party was just for the fighters, just the in crowd. But yeah, we got incredibly drunk that night, and I realized how much some of these MMA stroke pro wrestlers actually like to booze. It was quite an eye opener. So that was just after Sakuraba got his shoulder injured from the slam from Vandalay Silver in Pride. I can't remember which time it was they faced. Was it the second time they faced, maybe? So he's in a sling and blind drunk, and he wants me to sing Ultraman on the karaoke with him. And of course, I can't read kanji, but Ultraman's a kid's song, right? So, well, they have lots of kids' songs. So there's hiragana, so I can read the hiragana. So, steaming drunk with Sakuraba singing Ultra 7. And then falling asleep under the table, getting woken up, and then having to carry him downstairs out to the taxi. And I say carry because one arm's in a sling, we couldn't get under either side of him. So it was just me under one side of him. So I'm under one side of him in the lift, and we're going down. And then one of the other senpai, he's drunk as well, and he starts slapping me over the head. And I'm like, well, come on now, I'm holding your senpai. You know, you got to take some responsibility for this. So yeah, it was all a bit wild. And then I thought I'd have the day off the next day, but I got a phone call from Takada, and he's like, I want you to help me with some training, because he was just about to fight Mirko Krokop. So I had to go in with a hangover to the gym and do some sparring. Luckily, it was fairly light sparring, but things are a little bit easier when you're 25, you know.
I guess it's a good sort of segue, you know, talking about people like Sakuraba. The scene at that time, especially sort of in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. I talked to Keith Fargo about this when he came on for a chat. Obviously, you guys know each other very well, but talking about that Kaktogi boom and how big things were at that time. I'd sort of like to get your take on that and how you see this the combat sports scene here now. Obviously, at the time of this recording, a couple of weeks ago, we had a massive event at Tokyo Dome, 55,000 people to watch Tenshin and Takeru in this long awaited match. I wasn't able to go, but watching on TV, it felt like it was a little bit of a throwback to the old days. That's massive stadium event. How do you think the sort of Japanese combat sports scene has sort of changed and progressed over the last couple of decades, and where do you see it sort of heading in the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
Well, it's always been rich, even in that period where Pride disappeared, and before Rising was basically reincarnated out of the ashes. Even in that period, it never really went away. From an overseas perspective, things might have seemed to
that way,
quiet, but it certainly did not. There's a very, very rich, deep scene here. There's gyms everywhere. There's guys that will fight on small cards in clubs just for the hell of it. It's massive, and it's really showing no signs of slowing down. I mean, the youngsters now, what you have is the young guys are coming in with mixed martial arts backgrounds, and that wasn't the case back then in the early 2000s. The guys were all they'd all have a base in judo or wrestling. Occasionally a kickboxer would cross over, but it was mostly judoka or wrestlers. But now you've got these kids, they're in their late teens, early 20s, even mid 20s now, some of them, who they might have done a bit of wrestling when they were kids, but they got into mixed martial arts very quickly. So they're pure mixed martial artists, really, in a sense, So they have an edge in that respect, and also because of the internet. You can see techniques, you can learn stuff. Who was it? Was it the Korean Zombie? Who was it that pulled off the twister in the UFC for the first time? And then he came on the mic. They asked him, "Well, where did you learn that technique?" He said, "I saw it on YouTube."
Yeah, right.
So that says everything, and that's not unique. There's loads of guys who they'll see something on an instructional or an Instagram clip. They'll try it in the gym. It'll work, and there you go. So now is really exciting time, because the evolution's kind of speeding up.
Yeah.
So it's I see it just only getting richer and better and bigger.
Yeah. Do you think that the sort of combined promotion things is something that we'd see more of? Obviously, Rise and K1 plus a few other organizations came together for this big event. It was very successful, at least from a commercial perspective. Do you see that sort of happening more, or do you think that it's something that should happen more?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's obviously there's limitations to it. And it can cause some problems contractually, and it's not easy to put these things together from a business perspective. I personally quite like them. I think it's exciting, and it's good for the fighters, and especially recently, since we haven't been able to bring in many fighters from overseas, and that's what a lot of the top guys here, they're always banging on about. They're like, they get to the top three, they win a regional belt, and they're like, I need to be fighting somebody from overseas, I need to be fighting world class people, because they've made it to the top of the pile. So as things open up now this year and onwards, after the pandemic, it's going to be quite exciting. It's going to be quite interesting. I know Rise is going to be doing some of the World Series tournaments again, and those are phenomenal if you've seen any of them.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's very exciting. And what about for you, mate? What any new plans or different plans on the horizon? Where do you see yourself going with the commentary? Is there anything you'd like to do that you're not doing?
I'm really happy that I've got my teeth into pro wrestling. I was offered some pro wrestling a few years ago, and I turned it down back in 2018, 19 maybe. I didn't feel ready for it then. So it kind of fell into place 2 years ago, maybe 2020, and I thought, right, yeah, I'm going to go for it now because I've got enough experience. So I'm happy to get my teeth into that, and I'm really looking forward to getting more experience in that. And Pro Wrestling Noah is doing great right now. They're really they've got some excellent shows. They've got some excellent wrestlers, and I've landed on my feet there because it's one of the stronger style wrestling. It's very, very few gimmicks. So you see some real heavy hitting stuff, and some real dangerous things, these guys. I don't know how they get up and walk home after some of that stuff they do. So I'm really enjoying that. I don't think I could say that if it were something super gimmicky. I might feel a little bit, I wouldn't want to fake it just for the sake of doing it. Sure. So yeah, Pro Wrestling Noah has been a really good fit for me. I'd like to do some more interviews and more like studio style esports TV show things and interview the fighters, because I can, I know a lot of them and I can speak Japanese, so I can get their stories out there. And that's one of the things I love about commentating here, is getting the stories out, getting these names out, because there's so many great athletes here that they go unknown if they haven't fought in the UFC or whatever,
Yeah. Very cool. As you know, my older two sons are completely obsessed with wrestling, WWE mainly. So I took Max along to a Noah show earlier in the year, and he loved it, and I was quite impressed. I haven't really watched pro wrestling since I was a kid, and I've never been to a live event. But like you said, what they were doing is very athletic and very real, very impressive.
It's quite a fascinating world because, as you know, it's really deep rooted here, pro wrestling, and MMA was spawned really from pro wrestling here. In a big way. So it's really, really fascinating to see how they've taken catch wrestling techniques and various other techniques over the years and passed them down and still use them. It really is quite a fascinating world. They have these storylines and they have different factions and units, and the storylines are very intricate. They planned and play out over a course of a year or so. There's nothing random about what's going on. It's highly orchestrated, but with that element of danger. So it's for me, it's been a really, really fascinating insight compared to MMA and kickboxing and pro grappling.
Nice. It's just sort of starting to wind up. If people want to get into a little bit more of sort of the combat sports scene in Japan, where sort of the easiest places to find, I guess, some of the work that you do. Obviously, you mentioned Fight Pass, which has Quintet. Yeah.
Although Pancras is now doing stuff on a separate platform. There are going forward now that Pancras is doing English commentary again. We stopped it for a little while during the pandemic, but Pancras will be back regularly with English commentary. So I'll be posting links for that. Rise, I can't say which platform they're going to be using from now, but they have been on Fight TV. But there may be a change in platform there. But yeah, Rise has got some big things planned as well. Pro Wrestling Noah is on its own platform, Wrestle Universe, which has a bunch of other wrestling organizations on. It's a really good deal. It's like less than 1,000 yen a month, and you get a ton of content. It's really good. So it's a great time with all the streaming going on. You can get a lot of Pancras. Deep, I think, runs only Japanese commentary. Ryzen has been doing mostly Japanese commentary recently, but they do have some English commentary, although I can't personally how do I phrase this? I don't care too much for the quality of it, let's just say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all out there. There's still loads of stuff out there for people to watch.
Yeah. And then you personally, where can people sort of find out a little bit about you, a little bit more about you? What are your main sort of social platforms?
So yeah, _Stewart Fulton on Twitter. I mostly announce events that and information on there. Some on Instagram, Stewart _Fulton.
Yep.
So those two mostly, especially Twitter. I it's mainly fight related stuff. So any announcements that come through Pancras or Rise or Noah or Quintet will come through my Twitter.
Perfect. All right. I will include those links in the show notes. Stewart, it was great to catch up again. Great to have you on, hear about your amazing story. And yeah, it's going to be an exciting time, like you said, in combat sports. You know, hopefully we'll see more and more sort of international fighters coming into Japan and fighting out here. And so, yeah, we'll look forward to that and look forward to hearing you give a blow-by-blow description of all those events. So, yeah. It's great having you on, and thanks for your time.
Certainly, yeah. Thanks for having me, Sam. I need to check my grip strength again.
Yes.
And like I said about Noah, we need to get your boy along for a special meet and greet. Some of the wrestlers at Noah. That'd be great.
Oh, that'd be amazing. You'd absolutely love that. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much for coming on, Stewart. And yeah, look forward to catching up again.
Thank you too, Sam.
In the distant future. All right. Take care.
Cheers.